All right, so today we're going to take a deep dive into something really fascinating. You sent us this YouTube video about voodoo practices in Benin, and just from the first few minutes, I gotta say, I'm hooked. I mean, we're talking about West Africa, a place that's been so deeply connected to voodoo for centuries.
Yeah, Benin, officially the Republic of Benin, it's known for having this really vibrant spiritual landscape. And while our source material here is a YouTube video, I think we can add some interesting context to it. Maybe even debunk some common misconceptions that people have about voodoo. It's not all about black magic like you see in the
Oh,
movies.
absolutely. And speaking of things you don't see every day, this YouTuber takes us straight to a marketplace, and it is just overflowing with, well, let's just say interesting ingredients, animal parts, feathers, things you definitely wouldn't find at your local grocery store. So what can you tell us about the significance of these items in voodoo practice?
Well, I think what's fascinating here is that while the imagery can be, pretty striking, especially to those who aren't familiar with these traditions, using animal parts and rituals and traditional medicine isn't unique to Benin, we see similar practices and cultures all over the world, and it often comes in this deep connection with nature and a belief in the spiritual power of the natural world.
That's a good point. It's easy to jump to conclusions based on our own cultural lens. Speaking of different perspectives, the video then takes us to this incredible floating village called Ganvi. Can you believe it? A whole community thriving on a lake for over 300 years.
Yeah.
Talk about human ingenuity. But there's got to be more to the story than just survival, right? How did voodoo beliefs play a role in their adaptation to this unique environment?
The history of Ganvi is actually really compelling. It was founded by the Tofinu people who were looking for refuge from the Dahomey kingdom. Now remember, the Dahomeys were a powerful slave trading kingdom. And for the Tofinu, who had these strong spiritual beliefs, this was a major problem. Their decision to build a life on Lake Nukwe, which was considered sacred, it wasn't just practical, it was a way for them to keep their cultural and spiritual autonomy in the face of this immense pressure.
Wow. So they created a sanctuary both physically and spiritually. It really makes you think about how intertwined their beliefs are with their environment and their history. But then things get really interesting. The video shows this voodoo festival, and the YouTuber manages to get access to a ritual. There's a dog sacrifice, alcohol being poured, people going in and out of this seemingly abandoned house. There's chanting, drumming. It's all very intense. You mentioned before that animal sacrifice is part of some voodoo practices. Can you help us understand this in its cultural context?
Sure, it's important to note that not all voodoo practitioners engage in animal sacrifice. But for those who do, it's often about making an offering to spirits or deities. It's a way to appease them, to seek their guidance, or to request their intervention. And the specific animal, the way it's sacrificed, all the rituals involved, they all vary depending on the lineage, the purpose of the ritual, and the spirits being invoked.
Okay, so there's a lot of nuance to it. It's not just a blanket practice. And then there's this incredible part where they seemingly bury a child alive in a haystack. Of course, it's an illusion. And the YouTuber is trying to figure out the trick, which adds this whole other layer to the video. So what are your thoughts on this? Is it purely entertainment, or is there a deeper spiritual element to these performances?
That's where it gets really interesting. Voodoo, like many other spiritual traditions, has this performative aspect to it. These illusions, the costumes, the drumming and dancing, they all work together to create this heightened spiritual experience. It's not just about trickery, it's about invoking the sense of wonder, awe, and connection with the unseen world. Think of it like a powerful metaphor, a way to visually represent spiritual concepts and engage the community on different levels.
I'm starting to see how interconnected everything is. The history, the environment, the beliefs, the rituals. It's also intricately woven together. What I also found interesting is that the video mentions how there are two sides to the festival, one for tourists and one for locals. What do you think about this distinction?
That's an insightful observation, and it really raises questions about the complexities of cultural tourism and how it affects traditional practices. It's not uncommon for certain aspects of a spiritual tradition to be kind of adapted or presented differently for different audiences. It's about finding a balance between sharing your culture with the world and preserving its authenticity.
So it's not just about observing. It's about engaging with sensitivity and respect. I think that's a valuable takeaway for anyone who's interested in exploring different cultures. This video is a whirlwind of fascinating imagery and cultural insights. We've got animal parts in the marketplace, a floating village built for spiritual refuge rituals that combine sacrifice and spectacle. Let's take a moment to unpack what we've learned so far before we dive deeper into some of the other layers of the video.
It's a good point to kind of pause and reflect on what we've seen because this video is just one part of Benin's diverse culture. We have to remember that not everyone in Benin practices voodoo.
Right. The video actually mentions that too. It says that a large part of the population is Christian or Muslim, in addition to those who practice voodoo or other traditional African religions.
Exactly. You have this mix of ancient traditions existing alongside modern religious practices. And it's interesting when you think about the bigger picture, Benin's religious diversity is a reflection of its history, particularly its colonial past.
Yeah, the video highlights Benin's history with the slave trade. It even mentions that it was once known as the Slave Coast because of its role in the transatlantic slave trade.
Right, that's a dark chapter in Benin's history, like it is for many countries in West Africa. And then you have the period of French colonization, which lasted for over a century and still influences Benin today.
That explains why French is the official language there. It sets Benin apart from its neighbors like Nigeria and Ghana, which were British colonies. Do you think this colonial history had any impact on voodoo practices?
It's definitely a question that scholars have looked into. On one hand, you have the suppression of traditional African religions during the colonial period. But on the other hand, you also see syncretism, where elements of different belief systems mix together. For example, some voodoo practitioners included Catholic saints in their pantheon of spirits. It was also a form of resistance, a way to hold on to their spiritual identity as the religious landscape changed around them.
It's a reminder that cultures aren't static. They're always evolving and adapting. Despite this difficult history, the video shows the people of Benin as incredibly resilient.
Absolutely. And I think Ganvi is a perfect example of that resilience and ingenuity. It's a symbol of hope, a testament to the human spirit's ability to overcome challenges and create something truly unique.
I'm also struck by how the video shows these voodoo rituals happening in a seemingly abandoned house.
Hmm.
It gives this sense of mystery and intrigue. Why choose a location like that?
That's a great observation. It shows how certain places can have a spiritual significance in different cultures. In some voodoo traditions, these abandoned or liminal spaces are seen as places where the boundary between the physical world and the spiritual world is weaker. It's where it's easier to connect with spirits.
Like stepping into another realm, a place where the normal rules don't apply. And the way the video captures the energy of the festival with the drumming and chanting, it's almost like you can feel it yourself.
Yeah. Music and rhythm are so important in a lot of spiritual traditions, including voodoo. They help to create a trance-like state, allowing people to connect with the spiritual realm more deeply. The drumming, the chanting, the dancing, it all works together to change consciousness and create this feeling of collective energy.
It's like a way of communicating that goes beyond words, a way to tap into something primal and instinctive. I'm curious, from what you've seen in the video and your own expertise, do you think there were different expectations or experiences for tourists compared to locals at these festivals?
That's a really important question. It gets at the heart of the complexities of cultural tourism. You have this desire to share these traditions with the world, to show the beauty and richness of voodoo culture. But at the same time, there's a need to protect the integrity of these practices, to make sure they're not exploited or misrepresented. It's a tough balance to strike.
It's not just about watching, it's about participating with sensitivity and respect. I think that's a key takeaway for anyone interested in learning about other cultures. I have to bring up the child in the haystack illusion again. It's such a striking image, and the YouTuber trying to debunk it adds this whole detective element to the story. What do scholars say about the symbolic meaning behind this particular illusion?
While I can't speak to the specific interpretation of that illusion, I can say that symbolism is a big part of voodoo. The child, for instance, often represents innocence, purity, potential, the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. The haystack could symbolize nature, abundance, or even the unknown. It's all open to interpretation, and that's what's so cool about voodoo. It encourages you to think deeply, to connect the dots, to look beyond what's on the surface.
Like a puzzle waiting to be solved. The video also mentions that even the voodoo practitioners expect tips or payment for their performances, which brings up this intersection of spirituality, entertainment, and economics. Is that something you see often in voodoo practice?
Well, remember that spiritual practices exist within a social and economic reality. Just like any other profession, people who dedicate their lives to voodoo need to support themselves. And in a place like Benin, where tourism is such a big part of the economy, it's not surprising that these spiritual performances can become a way to earn a living.
It reminds us that even something as mystical as voodoo is still connected to daily life. It's not just about spirits and deities. It's about people, communities, and how they make a living. So are we ready to start wrapping up our deep dive into this video?
Yeah, I think we're ready to summarize what we've learned and pull out some key takeaways.
Let's do it. This has been quite a journey. What are some of the key takeaways we can take from this exploration of voodoo in Benin?
It has been quite a ride, right? I think one of the biggest takeaways for me is how important it is to approach different cultures and belief systems with an open mind. It's so easy to get caught up in our own worldview and judge things based on what we're used to. But this video and our discussion about it have really highlighted how beautiful and complex voodoo is. It's a living, breathing tradition that's so deeply connected to Benin's history, environment, and people.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's a great reminder that there's so many different ways of seeing and experiencing the world.
Yeah.
What other insights stand out to you?
Another key point is understanding the role of syncretism and how spiritual traditions evolve. We talked about how voodoo in Benin has been influenced by both the slave trade and French colonialism. It's a reminder that cultures aren't frozen in time. They adapt and change in response to new situations. And sometimes that evolution means mixing elements from different belief systems, which creates something totally new and unique.
It's like a cultural tapestry with threads from all different times and places woven together. And that makes it even more important to consider the historical context when we're exploring these traditions. We can't just look at them in isolation.
Exactly. We have to think about the social, political, and economic forces that have shaped these beliefs and practices over time. And we also have to be aware of the impact of tourism, how it can both help preserve these traditions and potentially lead to their exploitation. It's a delicate balance to strike.
Yeah, there's a lot to consider, but that's what makes these deep dives so interesting. They challenge us to broaden our understanding of the world and appreciate the diversity of human experience.
I couldn't agree more. It's all about fostering curiosity, empathy, and a willingness to learn from people who see things differently than we do.
This has been such a fascinating conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time to share your expertise and insights with us.
It's been my pleasure. I always love getting to talk about these kinds of topics.
And of course, a huge thank you to you, our listener, for sharing this amazing video with us. It sparked a real desire to learn more about Benin, its history, its people, and its spiritual traditions. I hope this deep dive has left you with a new appreciation for the power of belief and all the different ways that humans connect with the world around them. So until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.